Well, hi everybody, and welcome to our Church360 Ledger Complete Overview Training Webinar. My name's Anna Johnson, and I'll be hosting for you today. It's right now 1 o'clock, so I wanted to be respectful of you and get started on time. So here we go. Once again, my name's Anna Johnson. I'll get my picture up there in just a minute so you can see who I am. I'm the Assistant Marketing Manager here at Concordia Technology Solutions. My email and phone number are up there in case you want to jot those down for later. Again, you can give me a call or an email at any time. I always love to hear from our customers and from our potential customers. Just to let everybody know, here at Concordia Technology Solutions is the Church Administration Division of Concordia Publishing House. Concordia Publishing House is the publishing arm of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, so we've been around for quite a while. Here's a picture of our Concordia Publishing House booth at the 1904 World's Fair, and as you can imagine, a lot has changed since then, especially in terms of technology. But here at Concordia Publishing House, we're always striving to innovate and try new things, and we've been developing software for churches since 1984. So we've been doing this about 20 or 30 years almost now. So we definitely have a lot of experience with that. Some of you might know our other product shepherd staff, Church360, specifically Church360 Ledger is the online version of that software solution. Just a brief outline of today's webinar. We'll have 60 minutes for the presentation, 30 minutes for questions, but you can always ask questions throughout. So if I'm presenting on any specific portion of the software and a question comes to mind, just jot that down right in the chat box as you think of it, and we'll get back to it at the end of the webinar. That also reminds me, if at any time you can't hear me or you can't see my screen, please also just jot that down in the chat so that we can get back up and started as quickly as possible. And the recording will be shared, as you all saw, in the email that we sent out with this webinar announcement. All our recordings go to our YouTube channel, so you can always access them right after I'll be sending you all an email. Just a brief overview, which I kind of alluded to earlier. Church360 Ledger is one component of our Church360 suite, which is designed to give you complete church management. So Ledger is the financial portion of that suite. Church360 Members is our church management system where you would keep all your member information, their contact information. You can store pastoral visits, notes, and enter your offerings. And then Church360 Unite is our online website builder, which makes up the third component of that suite. So the goals of Church360 Ledger are threefold. We want it to be intuitive. We know that not everybody working in church finance has an accounting degree, so we want the software to be easy enough for you to use and your volunteers to use so they know exactly what's going on. Of course, we also want the software to be secure. We're always hearing, all of us, on the news about online hacking and dangers online, but we've worked really hard to keep your data secure because we know how important it is to your people and your church. Every dollar that someone gives is important, and their privacy needs to be protected as well. We also want to make this software focused. There's a lot of accounting softwares out there, but not so many designed specifically for churches. So when our software developers were writing the software, we're using it, they wanted to make it specifically geared towards church funds, and we use a fund accounting system to reflect that in the software. So for today, we'll do an overview. I'll give you a complete tour of the software and also go through questions and answers, as I was saying earlier. And just a brief overview of why Church360 Ledger specifically is important. We know that talking about church finances is difficult. Everybody wants to help out the church, and we know different people in your church have a different capacity to give or not to give, and we don't want to put any pressure on you. We want to make church finances easier for you. We know that every dollar has been donated, and every donation comes from the heart. People who go to church and give to a church give for a specific purpose, and that purpose is to spread the gospel, to help those in need, and to show mercy. So we want to help you to be good stewards, not only with the money you spend on your finance software, but with the money you receive with those donations you give out to all your specific ministries. And accountability is also critical. You don't want to make anyone mistakes accidentally or intentionally so as to become a poor steward of what you've been given. So what does accountability look like? It prevents those who are ill-intentioned from doing wrong. I know it's sad to say, but there have been a lot of churches recently who've been in trouble or had an unfortunate situation where they thought someone was helping and they found out later they weren't. So our software has accountability measures built in to prevent people like that from doing wrong, but also the well-intentioned from making mistakes. We all make mistakes every day, and we want to have a software that lets us correct those mistakes easily without having to become nervous or worried about what's going to happen. So how do you do this in a congregation? Well, we tried to think of our customer base when we were developing the software, and we realized that a lot of churches have volunteer ministry treasurers. They might not even have a paid office manager or office person on staff. They might have a part-time person. They might have an elected church treasurer who is an accountant in their day job, but then comes to church and only has a limited amount of time to help with those tasks. We also know that many churches have finance boards consisting of multiple people who might be in the software, who might be looking at different parts of the books to best serve their different ministry purposes. So Church360 Ledger, as I was saying, was designed to increase accountability. I'll show you that in the software in a minute. It was designed to prevent mistakes. And we did this by focusing on two key personas. So the first person we thought about was a church treasurer who's an experienced accountant. He oversees all aspects of the church finances, all the ministries, and he cares a lot about the details. He's coming from a background where lots of dollars are going in and out of a professional organization, and he wants to make sure as he does that work that that's happening in the church too. So he relies heavily on the audit trail that goes through to see who's been making changes and corrections, who's been making journal entries, and the like. But we know that not all churches have a professional treasurer or an accountant ready to help or able to help. So we wanted to make Ledger available for those who are just a willing volunteer that maybe balances their checkbook at home, enters some simple transactions, but deeply cares about the church and their ministry. This is the kind of person who will always raise their hand and say, yeah, I want to help. I just need to have the tools to be able to help. And of course, this person doesn't want to make a mistake. Out of the goodness of their heart, they're coming to the church and helping with the ministry, and that's their main concern. How can I help without making a mistake, without creating more work for other people? And so we designed the software to be both flexible and accountable enough for both of these different types of personalities and people at your church. So today we'll walk through a real-life example in the software. We'll start that in just a few minutes. I'll try to explore all areas of the software, and hopefully at the end of the day you'll be able to answer this question for yourself: how can I use Church360 Ledger to support my ministry? So we're going to build a story into our ledger walkthrough today, because I know talking about finances is sometimes a little bit dry. So we're going to pretend that we're setting up a Sunday school kickoff campaign in our Church360 Ledger account. So with a campaign like that, or a rally day event, there's multiple income streams. You have donations, you have the regular offerings, which may be allotted through the budget for Sunday school. There's also going to be multiple expense accounts. There's going to be Sunday school supplies you need to pay for, and curriculum, and there might even be music and those other types of expenses that you'll need to account for separately from within that Sunday school budget. Give me 1 second here. And we know that there is a specific budget. You have a Sunday school budget that's probably within an education budget and in a children's ministry budget. Ledger's able to budget and account for all of those different things depending on your church's accounting structure. And we also know that ministry leaders need to access that information. If you're the children's ministry for example, at a church, you might not need to know about every single donation and dollar that's going in and out. You might not need to know the budget for the whole church, but you're sure going to need to know that budget for your ministry area, and Sunday school is a big part of that. So I'll show you how to grant ministry leaders, ministry volunteers particular access within the program so they're just seeing what they need to see and just able to change and make transactions with those accounts that apply only to their area. And I'll also show you the 4 basic reports that are built into Church360 Ledger. With that in mind, let's get started. So I'm going to quickly slide over my Ledger window here. Hopefully you all can see that as it's getting up on the screen there. This is just your regular Ledger login screen. If you decide to start a trial with us or buy with us, you'll just go to a website. This CCC part is called your subdomain. You'll get to choose a unique subdomain for your church. And because it's online, you can access that anywhere, whether you're in the church office or you're at home on your laptop doing some work after hours. So I'll just get signed in here. And here's the main screen on Church360 Ledger. So before I get into the nitty-gritty about details and things like that, I'll just give you a brief walkthrough. So this home screen is telling you where you're at. There's a transaction option across all your screens. We have 5 different transaction types. And then you have your accounts listed up here. There's 4 different types of accounts: assets, liabilities, income, and expenses. And these little mini graphs here are meant to be real-world representations of the money that's flowing in and out of your church. Now, depending on the different accounts you have, you can click onto this mini graph and drill down as far as you need to, even within funds, to see specific transactions that only apply to those funds and those accounts. And that's true, we can do this for an income account, an expense account, or a liability account. I'm going to refresh here, just to give you a quick way to look at your transaction history. So this is a running balance graph of all 4 of these accounts combined, and then a list of each of your transactions sorted by date is always listed below on the main screen. So you have your date, type, payee if it's applicable, the account it's going to or from, and your memo, and then you'll also have this remaining balance here. A few things to note in this running balance graph right here, and I'm going to zoom in so hopefully you guys can see that. A locked icon by a transaction in the main screen means that that transaction has been reconciled, and is one of those security measures built into Church360 Ledger. Once a transaction is reconciled, it can't be changed anymore. The bank says it's over, you've accounted for it, it can't be changed. And this little kind of no symbol here means a transaction was voided. And if you can see, when you hover over it, Ledger will even tell you on what date the void took place. One more thing to note on the home screen before I get into setting up your general account is this info button, which is actually available on all screens. And this is a really helpful tool that our developers built in the software. It's our suggested help article selector. So this help article selector is page sensitive, which means if I'm on the home page, it'll give me some suggestions about help articles for the home page. If I'm on an accounts or income page, it'll give me different selections for that page. On any page, you can search for a specific topic. So if I wanted to search for income, I could do that, and you can see my results change based on my search message. If you're looking through the help system and you've looked through all the articles and you still can't find what you're looking for, this info center also gives you the option to send us a message. We have our support team here during normal business hours, and they'll get back to you, or you can just call them directly. Either way, they'll get back to you. They'll try and help you through your problem as quickly as possible. Now that you kind of have the basic overview, we're going to get right into setting up your accounts. So to do that, first we're going to go into our general settings. So to do that, you go in your settings cog, and then you select general here. General settings are very simple. You have your church name, which you'll customize to your church. Customer number you won't need to worry about because that's our internal billing number here at Concordia Technology Solutions. Check style has to do with whether you're printing checks and which checks you order. Your church address and your church phone number. You can go back and change these except for your customer number at any time while you're getting set up. After you've done that, you'll want to create your first book. And books are ways of organizing like accounts and like missions for your church. Now, most churches will probably only have one book, and that'll be their church book. But we know that sometimes churches might have a school or a preschool that's on a separate set of books. So you can add as many books as you want in Ledger. Again, to access those books, all you have to do is click on this settings cog and then select books. You go to this screen and then you'll select to add a new one. So we're just going to pretend we're adding a preschool book. You can select the starting month for your fiscal year. We know that some churches are on a regular calendar year fiscal year, while other churches might start their fiscal year in July and go to June. You can customize that in Ledger depending on your church's needs, and then the starting date for your book. So you can't enter a starting date and then try and backdate transactions. So we'll say this book started on January 1st of 2016. I'll just click submit. You'll get this nice confirmation message up top that says your book was created. And then to access your book, all you need to do is go up here to the top of your menu bar where it says Church next to the Ledger sign, and you'll be able to click back and forth between your books. So I'm going to go back to the church book because that's the main book we're working through today. And hopefully you saw too that that confirmation message appeared again on the top to let you know which book you were in. The next thing you'll do when you're setting up your Church360 Ledger account is to set up your chart of accounts. And within your chart of accounts, there's 4 different types of accounts. I'm just going to go through these really quickly for those of you who might not be super familiar with accounting. There's assets accounts. So assets are items that your congregation owns. So this could include money, building, land, or equipment. And there's 2 types of assets: current assets and fixed assets. So assets, most churches will have a checking account and a savings account, maybe a few assets other than that. The next things are liabilities, and those are accounts that you use to track your congregation's debts. So you might have short-term liabilities, which could include payroll taxes or offerings that haven't been remitted to other organizations, or long-term liabilities. So if you have a mortgage or a really long-term debt, that would go into a liability category. You also can set up income accounts that record the sources of revenue received, and this would really, I always think of it as what somebody's writing in the memo line on their check. So if they're writing, I want to give this to Vacation Bible School, you need to have an income account for that. And within all your different accounts, especially your asset accounts, you can have restricted funds. So within your checking account, you can have a portion of that designated for the specific purpose that somebody's giving to. So they can know that every dollar they donate to VBS or to Sunday school is actually going to that ministry. It's not going to get moved over into the general fund by accident. We also have expense accounts. And these are just the ways we record how money was spent. So salaries, materials for church programs, which we'll get into, office supplies, postage, and utilities. All these would be examples of expense accounts. So I'm going to add a few accounts into Church360 Ledger today to show you just how easy it is. And to do that, you'll just have to scroll to the bottom here, and you can see you have this new account and new category button. And that's true whether you're in expense accounts or income accounts, liability accounts, and then asset accounts have both new account and new category, and also that option of a restricted fund, which I was talking about earlier. We're going to add some expense accounts for Sunday school. And in my church, or churches I've been associated with, I know that Sunday school usually falls under that broad category of education. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add an education category. All you have to do is click on the new category button, type in the category name, and hit submit. You can also enter numbers in with those account titles if you wish. And then even within the education category, we might want to make a subcategory for Sunday school. And categories are important because they total the sum of all accounts under them. We have this option built into Ledger where you can use these indentations to show and signal sub-accounts of different areas. So for Sunday school, since we know that's a subcategory of education, I'm going to just move this over to the right. You can see that little red arrow there allows me to do that. And now we know that Sunday school is a category within education. And then within Sunday school, we're going to have different accounts. So I might make one account that's just for my Sunday school kickoff. I can enter an account number. If your church uses a numbering system, you can enter that here. You're not required to use a numbering system in Ledger. It's just to help you out. You can also enter your account number over here in this first box if you want that account to appear on your reports and statements. And you can also enter your initial balance. We're going to just enter $0 for now. I'm going to hit submit, and then I'm going to indent this again so we can see that Sunday School Kickoff is a sub-account within Sunday School. We're going to just make a few other accounts here so you can see how easy it is and how quick it is. So we'll go Sunday School Curriculum. It's also going to have an initial balance. And the initial balance field is just if you're coming over from another software, if you're coming through halfway through the fiscal year, you can easily transfer those over without having to backdate your transactions. And let's enter Sunday school supplies. I know a lot of Sunday schools need crafts and snacks. All of those could fall under our supplies expense categories. This brought up a good thing. If you mistakenly enter an account name, you want to edit it, you can always click back in it. And if you need to delete it, you can always click this red delete button. I'm going to click submit so we can keep our Sunday school supplies account. Shift it over. Setting up these accounts, like I said, is a really important part of the setup process, but hopefully no matter who's working at your church right now, they should have a chart of accounts. It would just be transferring that over into Ledger to make that more useful for you and your congregation. I'm going to save my changes. You'll receive a confirmation window like this that lets you know how many categories you created and how many accounts you created. If it looks wrong, you can always discard your changes. But today we're going to confirm these changes so we can keep moving forward with the presentation. And a message up here appears saying our chart of accounts was indeed updated. While you're editing your chart of accounts, you can also reset before changing, saving changes, and that'll take you back to the point of your last save. I'm just going to double check before we get out of the income accounts to make sure we do have a Sunday school income account right down here. So that'll help us when we're entering our offerings and transactions later. We'll calculate the income that goes in for Sunday school and count the expenses that go out for Sunday school so that everything is accounted in a parallel manner. If while you're in this chart of accounts you ever forget what assets, liabilities, income, or expenses are, you can always search in our Help Center. One of our techs, Kendall, has provided a great article in there with an overview of all these different account types. So again, if you're not really a numbers person and you're just helping out at church out of the goodness of your heart, you can always use that page-sensitive help system to get a little reminder of all these different account types. The next thing we're going to do after we set up our chart of accounts is go over to our budgets. So to do that, I'll click on my settings cog again and select budget. We'll give that just a second to load. You can select the different year for your budgets over here in the date selector. So since it's already 2016, we're going to set our budget for the next coming year, 2017. And our budgets have a 12-month view, which is a new update that our developers just added. You can also, if you only want to enter your totals for the entire year, you don't want to figure out the math dividing it over 12 months, you can enter a total budget for the year in your totals column. And you can see that the totals for each month subsequent, or each month of that year, automatically update. So again, Ledger does all that math for you. I'm going to just show this in another account to show you how it works. So I'll go into our endowment fund and I'll enter 600, and you'll see that Ledger's doing the math for me. So if your church council meets and they don't differentiate income and expenses by year, you just say, I'm going to give $600 to the endowment fund this year, you can do that. Ledger will split it up equally for you. Conversely, if, say, you know for something like VBS, if you know that all your income is only going to come in during certain months of the year, you can enter just a total for that certain month or two. Say we had $600 in May and $500 in June. Ledger will let you do that, and that total will automatically update over here in the left-hand column. You can also use last year's budget and last year's actual figures when you're creating your budget to let you know how it's going. So to do that, all you need to do is click on this last year's budget total, and you'll see all those totals update. And once they've updated like this, they're not static. You can just use that as a base and then edit as you see fit. You can change to last year's actuals. Hopefully that'll update. There you go. And you can see that when you click in these lines, Ledger does automatically show you the previous year budget and the previous year actual. So if you're the treasurer and you're going through to create your accounts for the entire year, you can always have that baseline. Another really nice option that our developers just optimized is that you can always export this budget view to Excel if you prefer working with Excel better than working in Ledger itself. So I'm going to click on this export button. This could be really handy if you were in a church meeting or on the road and you didn't have internet access. You could edit your budgets on your desktop and then come back later to make those changes. So this is what the budget export looks like when it comes directly from Ledger. You can see our developers formatted it nicely. I'm going to expand this a little so we can just see our income totals. The other nice thing that our developers just recently added is that you can import it back in after you've exported. So if I wanted to use some of Ledger's functionality, or excuse me, Excel's functionality, and I wanted to add this, I wanted to, 12,000 is kind of a lot. 1200. If I wanted to drop down, I could fill out this whole chart of accounts in Excel, then select it when I was ready. So I'm just going to select this area. You just use your regular Control-C or right-click and copy. I can go back into Ledger, and Ledger will automatically copy it back over just by using that right-click and paste or Control-V. All your normal shortcuts work, and it'll easily transfer between Excel and Ledger. We know that a lot of our customers had asked for that previously, and that was something we, again, just did add. A few other things to note here in the budgets view before I move on to bigger and better things. These grayed out categories have a couple first pieces. So we'll have income is a grayed out category, expenses, income and expenses, which are the sum of all the rows underneath it. And these are things you can't copy into. It's a formula that calculates. And that's just another check to make sure that you're not having to worry about math. Ledger will do the math for you. And then any sub-accounts or categories you created will be also represented in gray, but they'll be indented just like they were in that chart of accounts. And so you can see anytime I make a change to one of the accounts, both of these categories above will automatically update. Once you've gotten your budget ready, and you can see this is not a great budget because we're aiming to perform at a deficit, you can mix and match with it. I think I probably set the church staff salary a bit too high for our purposes, so we'll just change that for now. Once you've got it set just the way you wanted, you can always reset or save your changes. Your ultimate goal, again, at the end of the year, is that all these numbers in your income minus your expense category would be a positive, so your church is operating without a deficit. Again, you just scroll down to your bottom of your budgets and you click Save Changes, and you'll receive this nice notification that your budgets were updated. Just want to again show you one quick thing. I know when I was showing books, when we were creating the books, we had the option to select a fiscal year start month. But if you decide maybe halfway through the year, if you get a new policy for your church and you say, we're going to start this next fiscal year in a different month than we're used to, it's no worries. You can just go to the settings and fiscal years option, and you can change the start month. It can be any of the 12 months of the year. So let's say we wanted to start our next fiscal year in October. I'd click Save. It'll let me know my fiscal year has been created. And if I had more years in here, there's an option to show me when fiscal years have been locked and closed so that you can't go back and mistakenly edit transactions on a set of books that's been closed already. Once your fiscal year has been reset, you can go back into your budgets. And hopefully, once I refresh here, just give me a few seconds. Sorry about my internet connection. You can see that a ledger accounted for the new starting time of your next fiscal year. And so your 2016-17 fiscal year, again, will start in October. These months up here automatically adjust based on whatever fiscal year you start. So that's a really nice feature. I'm going to keep working my way through settings here, and the next thing is recurring transactions. Now, we haven't talked a lot about entering transactions so far, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But just so you know, you can set up recurring transactions throughout Ledger for any type of payment or check or even income coming in. And these are just meant to be reminders. You can filter and search through them so you have your recurring transactions for children's salary, and you can also edit that transaction using our main edit view. So these recurring transactions are really, I really just use them as reminders for whatever I'm working through. We also have an imported transactions button. We do have work with paychecks. We know that a lot of our churches use paychecks for payroll. So you can import your paychecks file into Church360 Ledger using this prompt on the screen. It'll ask you for your paychecks file that you'll be able to export. So that's a nice feature if your church uses paychecks. Again, if you don't use paychecks, you can just enter those things manually, such as your payroll by hand within the transaction portion of Ledger. One other type of imported transaction I also quickly want to talk about is our pending transactions over here. And these are, hold on one second. And this transaction up top here was a transaction that came over from Church360 members. So we have, as I was talking at the beginning of our webinar, we have our Church360 members suite. And so if you enter offerings through Church360 members, they can always come over into Church360 Ledger, however much you like them to. The next thing I'm going to talk about is users and roles. Again, users and roles are ways you can really personalize the experience for your church and for your needs. To select those, you just click the settings cog and go down to users. And you can always add new users in different roles based on the people of your congregation. So for our church here, we want to add Sue Abbott and her email address. Let me just get it here. It's sueabbott@mailinator.com. And then you can select different roles for that person. So let's say Sue is the new treasurer and John Presley was the old treasurer. So we can take his role off there. We can add treasurer to Sue's, submit, and Ledger will automatically save an update for you. Now, if you have different roles for people that you haven't created, you can always change those here. So, for example, you might have your church children's ministry director, and you don't want them to see every single subset accounts. So you can select from the roles view which role that applies to, and you can select which accounts that person can see. So your children's ministry director, you would want them to see education, you'd want them to see Sunday school and VBS, and you want to see those same things as income accounts and also their expense accounts. So you can really tailor this as much or as little you want depending on the different roles at your congregation. And again, that automatically saves, so once I click out of here, it'll see this changes to can view 18 selected accounts. Most churches I've been at, the church children's ministry director can't really deposit things or create checks or different payments, so I'm not going to select any of these transaction options down here. I'm going to add another new role just to show you how easy it is to add new roles here. And to do that, we'll just need to add the new role. We'll add the financial secretary. So financial secretary, you can choose which book. She might need to see the church and the preschool book. You can select whether or not they want to manage the chart of accounts and which different types of transactions they can create. So maybe they can create deposits and payments and transfers and can print and create checks, but they can't edit journal entries or transactions. Maybe that's something that's only left up to your treasurer at your church. Once you've submitted that role, you can just click here and submit. Again, that message about this role was created will appear at the top. Then when you go back to users, you can just select which user applies to which role and add children's ministry director. A nice thing with this too is, say someone was treasurer and financial secretary, or they also were an administrator, you can add multiple people for multiple roles just to give you that different level of depth and clarity. One nice thing, no matter how many users and roles you set up here, all of these things are tracked in our event log, and that's what I was alluding to earlier in the presentation. Within the event log, you can see when changes were made, what type of change was made, and you can filter down by maybe updated or destroyed transactions. You can see which type of transaction and which user did this. So again, if you're at a church with different people in different roles, you want to be the overseer, or maybe you're just one cog in a big wheel, you can see who made changes and what they did. And there's also a message to let you know exactly what changes were made. If that transaction is still accessible, you can just click on the transaction number from the event log and it'll take you to that exact payment. And then you can perform all your normal payment options there, whether you're voiding, copying, or saving any of those transaction types. The next thing we're going to want to do is move down here. We've gone through users, roles, and books. So we're going to set up a payee. And a payee is someone your church writes checks to or makes payments to. So your church staff might be a payee. Your regular bill companies, you see we have our fictional phone and electric company, are all in there. To add a new payee, you just scroll down to the bottom of this Add Payee screen, click on Add a New One. Since we're talking about Sunday school today, we'll have Concordia Publishing House. Sorry, I can't type. Be our payee, and we'll enter their address. And we can also make notes for them. So we buy Sunday school from CPH. As soon as you're added your payee, you can just submit that. You'll get a notification up here that the payee was created, and your changes are saved automatically from within there. If one of your payees has a change of address, or you want to add a new address, you can always add their address and edit their payee information later, depending on what you need to do with that person. And you can also access their payee history. You can see all the different accounts and funds that have been made to that certain payee. Now that we've gone through kind of all the setup tasks, the next thing we're going to start doing is creating transactions. As I pointed out in the beginning, this new transaction bar is really available from any screen within Ledger. So no matter what you're doing, even if you're printing a check or changing your own user settings, this new transaction bar never goes away. So even if I was on my user settings page and I wanted to change my password, I could always create that transaction. I always know where to go. So I'm going to show you examples of each of the transaction types you can perform in Church360 Ledger. The first thing we're going to do is a transfer, and say that we had allotted certain portion of our offerings from the general fund to go into Sunday school in July or August of every year as Sunday school is ramping up. So I'm going to just say transfer to Sunday school from general. Oh, and I can't do that one, so I'll just do transfer to Sunday school. So here you would pick where the money is coming from. Let's say we're going to add $500 from our checking account, and we want that to go into the restricted fund for Sunday school, so I would just select Sunday school. If it was a recurring transaction, say at every year on August 1st, I want to make this $500 transfer to Sunday school. And again, you can change the date up here so all our dates align. You can do that. So next year on August 1st, you won't have to remember, oh, I need to enter that transaction. Ledger will remember that for you and remind you on August 1st in your notification center. Once all your settings have been saved, you can just click Save and it'll let you know that recurring transaction was created. Once we go back to our home screen here, since it's not August 1st, that isn't listed there, but your recurring transactions will appear in your home screen. Different payment types. The next payment type is a deposit payment type, and I always like to think of this as a deposit slip you would bring to the bank. What would you fill out? What would you put on it at your church? So if we said this was our offerings deposit from last weekend, which let me check my dates real quick, was Sunday, July 24th. So we have July 24th offerings. Say you didn't make it to the bank right away on Monday, say you made it on Tuesday. If there is a payee for your deposit, somebody associated with that, you could enter it here. And we're going to add, let's say we had $1,200 for our offerings, and $500 that was for the general fund, and $200 was from the Sunday school fund. One nice thing, if you're watching down here, Ledger again does the math for you. So in this next line at the bottom here, it'll show you the amount of money left needed to balance your debits and credits for that transaction. And this is double entry accounting, which is a common accounting style that many of our churches use. That's an acceptable practice. So say, just to balance it out, we'll say $100 was given to the women's fund on Sunday, and $400 is given to music ministry. Again, as with a transfer, you can make any type of transaction recurring. Once you're ready and your debits and credits balance, you can just click Save. It'll let you know the new transaction was created, and hopefully you saw that here that your deposit was automatically entered on that start screen. One nice thing about this home screen is that you can access any of your transactions from the home screen by just clicking on the transaction name, and it'll go right there. So if you realize you made a typo and it wasn't $1,200, it was $200, and then you would have to go over here and balance it out. You can add a memo here. Typo was looking at the wrong number. So you can add that memo, you can save it, you can also void any of your transactions. Just go back into that transaction, just click void. And the nice thing that Ledger does for you, if you're not a trained accountant and you don't know much about journal entries, anytime you void or edit a transaction, Ledger automatically creates a journal entry for you, and the type is correction. And you can see that all my typos, all my memos from that transaction I just added are added as journal entries in the general ledger without me having to think about it. I just thought, oops, I made a mistake. I didn't have to figure out, oh, I need a journal entry right now. I can just always access that original transaction. You can also make payments. And just quickly, the difference between a payment and a check is a paper check that somebody gives to you, and a payment might be an electronic payment you make. So for payments, we'll have Sunday school, and say that our payee was the grocery store. Maybe we bought groceries online. Maybe it's a very high-tech grocery store. So we're just taking your money out of your checking account, and our expense account will be Sunday school kickoff. Say we were buying cookies for the Sunday school kickoff. We want to have a lot of cookies. So I can make that payment type, give my payee, again, the debits and credits balance. If I mistakenly didn't have my debits and credits balance, Ledger wouldn't let me save that transaction. And you can see this message appears up here. It says the transaction cannot be created because line items must sum to 0. So the credits and the debits must equal. So I can look down here in my debits and credits and see, oh, I made a typo. And now it bounces. I can hit save. Again, it'll let me know the transaction was created. And I can go back to my home screen and see it's right there. If I wanted to make a check, the process is just about the same. So new transaction and check. So we'll say this check is for Sunday school curriculum. I hope I'm spelling that right. And one nice thing our developers built in is this little fake check section. So if you're used to writing a check at home, you can always think about it in this way, and the check will auto-populate for you so you can see what your check would look like. Payee will be that Concordia Publishing House. Payee we just added. Say it was check number 700. Again, actually, for our asset account, let's have it come straight from that Sunday school account just so you can see how that works. Sunday school account, we'll say our curriculum this time was $300, and the expense account it's going to be attributed to is Sunday school curriculum. Our debits and credits match here, and then I can just click save. Then this message for confirmation says that the check was added to your print queue. And a print queue is the way you can create a bunch of checks at once without having to print each time. So within your print queue, you might have a number of checks listed, and you have two options. You can print them. In that print preview that you see right here will be based on that check style you set in your settings. I'll just show you again real quickly here in case you forgot. So top or middle. And once I go back to the print queue and I hit print, you can see the option changed right there. Or if you write out your checks by hand and you don't want to physically print them from your computer, you can just click this checkbox and mark as printed. And it says this check will be removed from the print queue, and you can just click confirm. So you can always enter those transactions even if you might not be printing your checks directly from Ledger. Ledger will always keep track of it for you, and you won't have to keep going back to that print time and relocating it. The last transaction type, and again this is really for people who are experienced accountant, is just a plain old journal entry. And I know you can use these for interest payments sometimes. So maybe we got, let's see, this is probably not going to be that realistic, but say we had our debits and our credits, and you could just enter your journal entries as needed. I know our other tech here who used to be an accountant, he has a recurring journal entry to remind him to enter the interest payments at our fictional church online. So you can always enter journal entries if that's something you're comfortable with. If it's not, again, you can always just edit your transactions from the home screen, and Ledger creates that journal entry for you. I'm just going to avoid this journal entry because it was just for an example right here. Few other things to go through. I want to show you a little bit how pending transactions work, and I have a number of types of pending transactions ready to go here, and I'm going to go through a few of them. The first pending transaction I'm going to do is actually a pending transaction that comes from Church360 Members, which is our church management software. I can tell that because it has our little members logo here. To make that transaction final, I'll just click here. And this was an offering that somebody gave in Church360 Members, and I know it's for Sunday school because my fund from Church360 Members came over. Now I'll need to match it with my Sunday school fund here because members doesn't know whether something is necessarily an income or an expense account, but Ledger does need to know those things. The nice thing is that once you match accounts for members in Ledger, Ledger will remember that, so you don't have to keep matching your different accounts every time. For my memo, I'll just write in Sunday school donation. And I can select a date. We'll say that was on Sunday, somebody gave that. And then I can just save. And as soon as the transaction was created, it was removed from my pending transaction screen. These other 3 pending transactions here are based on those pending transactions we had set up in settings under recurring transactions. So I have these set up in our account just to remind me of the water bills coming, and you can always edit this. So although the original one said March water bill, I can change it to say July water bill. If the payee changed, I could change it here. If I wanted to change expense or liability accounts or even the date, I could. And I'll save that, and it's only saving that transaction for July. It's not messing with my ongoing recurring transaction. Now, if I wanted to delete that recurring transaction completely, I could click on this minus sign within recurring transactions and just click delete. So we can do this for the phone bill. Again, I'll just zero out March and write in July. Maybe my phone bill was a little more expensive this month for some reason, so I can always edit the amounts in here and click save. And if you have a pending transaction that you don't want to enter for some reason, say you had a transaction that took place every month but July, but you still wanted to enter that, you can always close out of this, and then it will change your pending transactions number to 0 up there. The next thing I want to talk about is reconciling your transactions. I know not a lot of people are always reconciling, but it's really important to keep your books straight and clean and to know what's going on at your church. The reconciliation process is pretty simple in Church360 Ledger. Now, since I am working just with our demo database here, I don't have an actual bank statement to look at, but what you would do is as soon as you got your bank statement from the bank, you would just click into your asset account and select which asset account your banking statement came from. And then within here, you would just click on this green reconcile button. And you're taken to this screen, and I've already started to reconcile a bit here, but I'll show you how everything works, no worries. So you would enter the statement date from your bank statement just as it appears, the starting balance and the ending balance on your bank statement. And then you would go through all your transactions, match them up one for one on your bank statement. I know when I was actually working at a nonprofit, we would do this, and we had our bank statement, and I would just highlight the transaction and mark it off all at the same time. So I really knew I was reconciling. And the main goal in this reconciliation screen is to have off by $0 in your view. Now you can see I'm off by $105 if I mistakenly clicked a wrong number. If I tried to save here, it wouldn't let me save. Ledger's not going to let you save anything that it knows you did incorrectly, even if it was a simple mistake. So I'm going to uncheck this, and now that we're off by 0, we're completely reconciled. Our statement difference, which is calculated here, and the selected difference, which is the compilation of all these different transaction types, is the same. I can hit save, and Ledger lets me know the line items were reconciled. So now you can see I have all these new reconciled transactions over here in the home screen. And if I try to edit this transaction after it's been reconciled, it will gray out and Ledger won't let me do any of these things. I can't edit a reconciled transaction because it's already been accounted for by me and by the bank. A few other things just to notice here, whether you're in the assets screen or on your home screen, it's always easy to access your different payees or different accounts from wherever you are. So if I was looking at my accounts and I'm like, oh, I need to know more about Concordia Publishing House, I could just click on their names, see all their information, see what accounts there have been debits and credits for, and I can always go back and forth with all of these things. So I can do the same. I can look at the actual account and I can see change over time in that account. Thankfully this account is at 0 now. And just one other quick note, anytime you're spending money, that number will appear in red in parentheses, and if you're making money or getting money to a certain account, it appears in black. Again, these balances you can go over time to track your changes. The last thing I'm going to do in our last 5 minutes, and then I'm going to go over and look at any questions. So if you've had questions building up, now's a great time to start thinking of those because we have about 5 minutes left in my presentation. There's 4 main account types in Ledger, and this was something our developers decided on when we were creating the software, and these were the 4 most common types of reports you needed, and they were reports that were absolutely necessary, no more, no less. We wanted to make Ledger very simple, so we didn't want to cloud it up with a bunch of reports. So the first report is the General Ledger report, and again, the General Ledger report is just a record of all the different transactions that have been made from all your accounts throughout all time. So this is the baseline record of everything that's happened. Some nice features within this General Ledger report, if you're looking for just a certain type of transaction, you can select that. You can use a date selector to select a year, a quarter, a month. So if I wanted to go to April, only April will be displayed there. If I wanted to enter in a special date range, I could that. If I wanted to do quarter 3, because I know we're in quarter 3 right now, I can do that. You can also sort by payee or filter by payee, excuse me. So if I didn't want to see transactions that had no payee, I just deselect that. Hopefully, oh, I need to refresh there. Sorry about that. And I can also group by payee. So if I wanted to see, these are all my payees, but you can see grouping by payee will add a nice header here, and then it will group them underneath. And I believe when you export to Excel, I'll just give that a few minutes, it'll leave that grouping in there. And then you can always ungroup if you need to. Same thing with accounts. You can group by account. You can filter and group by account. You can also see your memos here. So there's a lot of flexibility within this General Ledger report. Oh, that's my budgets report. Here we go. Give it a second to open. So you can see it kept the date range up here and kept my grouping. So whatever groupings you do in that General Ledger report, it will remember in the export to Excel. I know some people like to do certain things in Ledger and then manipulate it in Excel. That's perfectly fine. You can from this view or save it as a PDF. I think that's what mine's defaulted to. Any of those options are available to you from the General Ledger report. Next report is Income and Expense report. This is the report that's probably most useful for looking at your budgets versus actuals for a particular year or time period. So I'm just going to go back to 2016. You can collapse or expand the different categories here depending on what you would like. Let me click out of there. And it'll tell you your dollars remaining. So if you're at your quarterly or monthly church council meeting and you need to see how you're doing versus budget, you can definitely get that from Ledger. And it also tell you probably here most importantly, are you operating in the black or the red and how you're doing next to budget for this year. Next report is your chart of accounts report, and this just tracks your debits and credits for your asset, liability, income, and expense accounts over time, and your change either via percentage or dollars. As with the other reports, you can always export those reports to Excel or print them as you need to. And the fourth report is a balance sheet. So this just includes assets and liabilities for your church. So this is really, versus that chart of accounts report, this is a really larger scale, big picture reports of your church's overall financial standing. So you can see our church is doing well here. We have more assets than liabilities, so our church is not going to fold. That's about all I have. Just one more reminder about reports is that you can track everything in the log. This isn't a report per se, but our developers included it in the report category because it's one of those things you probably would like to print and share if there's ever a question within your church. So now that it's 2 o'clock, I've been presenting for almost an hour and you guys have been waiting patiently, I'm sure. So if you want to ask any questions, now's the time in the chat box. You can just enter those in the same place that you let me know you could hear me. I'm going to switch over to my PowerPoint again, just to go through a few last minute things. If you liked what you saw in your presentation today, you can start your free 37-day trial at 360ledger.com. We give you 37 days because we want to give you that full reconciliation experience, a full month's worth of work, and we know that some places your bank statements don't come within that 30-day period. So you can have free 37-day trial at 360ledger.com. If you have any questions based on today's presentation or you want to talk to a sales rep, my name and number are up there, and so is the sales team. You can talk to either one of us directly and we'll hopefully get everything answered for you. I don't see any questions in the chat now, so I'm going to just leave this up here for a few seconds. Thank you for those of you who stuck around with me today, and we hope to talk to you again very soon.